Another Wednesday's come and gone, and I've got some comics. Let's talk about them. Hey, welcome to 9 Panel Grid. This week, we've seen darkened versions of our beloved superheroes, anthropomorphic gods, and editorial interference, but maybe in the best way. But we're going to kick things off this week with Absolute Power #1, written by Mark Waid with artwork by Dan Mora. This was a really cool kickoff to the summer event here from DC Comics. And I was really enthused by the way that they kind of approached everything. This feels like an early 2000s Marvel event in the best way possible, where it's really connecting from all of the interactions that are happening in all of the flagship titles, all throughout DC. We're seeing things playing with Batman, with Superman, some of the characters that we've been introduced to recently. The only downside with saying all of that is that it feels a little bit like we're undoing some of the things that we saw take place in those issues. Without giving too much away, we've kind of seen the culmination of some characters and some storylines, and it seems like this kind of erases a little bit of those individual stories to tell a bigger story in the scope of the DC universe. So Amanda Waller has kind of had it in for the superheroes, and she's enacted this plan that's really taking it directly to them and kind of showing them that they're not the all-powerful beings that they are seen to be. She's done this in a really cool, really interesting way, and I think that Mark Waid is really crafting this. It's going to be exciting. I'm really excited to see where things go from here on out. Dan Mora, though, man, he is just a machine. I can't put my finger on how he can do the things that he does at the frequency in which he's doing them. The real standout to this issue in particular, though, I gotta say, is going to be the coloring and the letters. I think that the combination of Mark Waid and Dan Mora is something that we've come to know and love. But the things that we've seen, the scope in this story when it comes to the colors and the lettering, really make this issue breathe and really bring some of the actions that take place to life. It makes it a much more interesting visual storytelling type of comic book, and I really appreciate that. But overall, this is an extraordinary kickoff to this summer event here, and I can't wait to see where it goes. All right, for our next book, let's talk Barbaric, Born in Blood #2, written by Michael Morisi with artwork by Nathan Gooden. I can't help but feel like something's lost with the Barbaric storyline here. I think maybe it's just lost some of its charm, and I think that comes by way of the fact that our main character, Owen, is a little bit more heroic and a little bit more sympathetic than he's ever been, which kind of takes a little bit of the fun away from that character. With this story, we've still seen him and his companions. They're taken, prisoner by some of the barbarians that Owen was raised with, some of the people that he knows the best. But they've kind of taken on a villainous role recently. So with Owen playing the hero and not even being a reluctant hero at this point, again, part of the fun is taken away because you don't see him drug through some of these situations as much as he's taking action. The artwork in this, again, in the same way, feels a little bit rushed. It feels like thumbnail versions of the paneling that we've seen in other issues, but maybe just kind of blown up. And I don't know where that's all coming from here. It just because it seems like this could be a really interesting, fascinating exploration of this character visually as well. And it's just kind of not hitting in the same way that previous parts of the series had. So I don't know. I'm feeling a little bit conflicted with this. It still has room to grow. I think there's interesting things that happen in here. I think that Owen's companions are being fleshed out in a really interesting way that I want to see more of. However, our flagship character, the barbarian himself, leaves a little bit to be desired. With our next book, let's talk Batman #150, the milestone issue, written by Chip Zdarsky with artwork by Dennis Cowan and Jorge Jimenez. This was a bit of a letdown, if I'm being completely honest. Let's start right off the top here. This is a milestone issue, and nothing about this feels milestone whatsoever. I understand that we are just coming out of kind of a big arc, with big, wide, sweeping kind of changes that happen to our main character here. But you would think that there would be something more to this, something I don't know, something that felt of significance. And this is really a small scope, heartfelt issue that really doesn't revolve around Bruce or Batman so much as it revolves around the impact that he's had on a criminal and this criminal's family. So it's a really cool exploration of some of the things that we don't get to see a lot. Again, the downside is just the fact that this doesn't feel like a milestone issue as much as it feels like a filler issue for anywhere else that this could have taken place within any other arc. So it's a little bit disappointing. It was cool seeing Dennis Cowan be able to kind of play in the Batman world a little bit, but again, with Batman and Bruce really not taking a central role within the story, it kind of felt like maybe some skills were, I don't know, not played with to the best of their ability, because I would have loved to have seen him draw Batman way more than he has. In fact, when Batman does come into play, it's in flashbacks, and those flashbacks are handled by Jorge Jimenez. So again, where's the fun for our artist here? It kind of felt like a letdown to him in particular. Um, Again, like this was like a bummer of an issue for Batman, and I hate to be a bummer, reviewer for this issue, but I got to be honest, and this one just absolutely did not do it for me. And with our next book, let's talk Bear Pirate Viking Queen #3, written by Sean Lewis with artwork by Jonathan Marks. This has been a really interesting book. I'm not sure if there's any other word that I can use besides interesting, to be completely honest. The scope of this story is very non-linear, I guess I would say. This issue, it's the culmination of a 3-issue miniseries, and it really takes on an exploration of, primarily, you would think, these two main characters that we've been introduced to, which is the Viking and the Queen character, as the pirate saw his demise earlier on. I'm not really sure what they were trying to accomplish with this issue and with this series overall. The messaging felt really muddled. Now, the positive of this issue and the two issues prior is that the artwork is absolutely phenomenal. In fact, what it really feels like with all of this is that we saw like there was an artist that had a culmination of pages, and there was a writer that decided to craft a story around those pages, as opposed to an artist drawing towards a story that's trying to be told. I don't know if this was overly successful. In fact, the metaphor or the messaging behind this, as Sean Lewis gives a little recap and kind of like what you were supposed to take away with at the very end of this issue, I didn't take away from that at all. If he didn't write that, that would not have been the message that I walked away with from this story, which is wholly discouraging because I think that Sean Lewis is an incredible writer, and I've liked so many of his stories previously. And paired with Jonathan Marks, who I really hadn't had exposure to previously, but I have seen phenomenal work from him with this series now, I don't know. This felt really weird to me. And I think maybe this is going to be one of those stories that possibly reads better altogether, given a little bit of time away, to kind of let everything really dig in and kind of like get their hooks in me. But as for right now, this just kind of felt messy. All right, let's infuse some positivity into this, right? Let's talk The Boy Wonder #3, written and drawn by Junie Ba. This was another fantastic issue of this series. I love what they're doing with the exploration of Damien, not only in the past, but in the present day as well, kind of as he works his way through how he's becoming Robin, how he is perceiving becoming the best Robin, and really how he's showing that a little bit. And you were getting hints of it in the present day as he's kind of narrating these stories to a criminal that maybe he's trying to reform in a way that he didn't necessarily know how to in his earlier days as a Robin. Now, the interesting thing about this issue in particular is that each one is an exploration of a previous Robin, and we've spent time with Dick Grayson, we've spent time with Jason Todd, and right now it's our time to spend some time with Tim Drake. And this was really a more fun issue than we've seen previously. They really spend time having like a really good narrative back and forth where Damien's not trusting of Tim, and Tim is way more charismatic than maybe the other Robins had been. Where Dick is really headstrong, where Jason is really unsure of himself and kind of only knows one way, which is a path of violence. Tim is much more the detective. Tim is much more like Bruce and having those dual personas than I think that anyone really envisions, including Damien himself. But it's such a nice twist and turn when Damien starts seeing some of these things, and he starts seeing how Tim has made a success of being Robin and maybe how he can incorporate that into his own actions. Now, the visual storytelling in here is absolutely awesome, though. There's a lot of, just like the narrative being fun, some of the paneling and some of the page layouts in here are absolutely just as fun, where Damien is navigating his way through some of the ventilation work while they're in one of the buildings as Oswald Cobblepot is having one of his big charity events. Really cool, really inventive storytelling that I don't think is explored enough in mainstream comics, especially. So I'm so glad that we're seeing this get some room to breathe and really tell the story in this particular way. Really great issue, another fantastic outing here from Junie Baugh, and I can't wait to see how this miniseries continues to grow and evolve. And next up, let's talk Doctor Strange number 17, written by Jed MacKay with artwork by Pasquale Ferry. So this is another chapter in the most successful tie-in to the Blood Hunt event here, seeing that it's also written by Jed MacKay. And this is really an exploration primarily on the companions of Stephen Strange, those being his dog, Victor Strange, Wong, and Mordo. So a couple villains, couple heroes per se. But what we're seeing is that while Stephen Strange is kind of removed from his physical form while it's in a vampiric state and his astral form is off trying to fight the battle of the vampire assaults, Victor Strange has kind of taken control of his body, and we're seeing all of his, companions doing their best to try to remove Victor Strange and get, Steven back to a place where he can kind of get back to into his body. The most exciting thing though is the dog. He is just such a light, warm like presence in this book. It's just heartwarming. I love seeing everything that happens on here. And when we see some of the manifestations, kind of some of the ways that they work with magic, right? And like I said, a manifestation. I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but the way that they're working with these magical things, it's really awesome. I think it's kind of going outside of the scope of what we've seen previously, and sometimes magic gets a little bit like a an ex machina kind of thing. It's just a solution to a problem, but it doesn't need to make sense. This is that, but it's also kind of done so in a way that's really creative, and I think it was really nice the way that they unraveled it and kind of showed this to you, because I think it was an earned easy fix as opposed to something that was just like swept underneath a rug. So overall, I think this was a successful issue and most importantly, a successful tie-in to the Blood Hunt event. All right, unfortunately, we kind of have to talk about the inverse of that tie-in notion here. Let's talk Miles Morales Spider-Man number 22, written by Cody Ziegler with artwork by Brent Peoples. This, again, is a tie into the Blood Hunt event, and there really wasn't a lot that was successful about this issue. We see the team up between Miles and Dracula and Blade's daughter and some of the other characters that have been part of the Miles Morales storyline since Cody Ziegler's tenure started. But everything just seems rushed. Everything seems a little bit muddy. Miles is a vampire now, and quite frankly, I just don't know how successful this is. And I've been struggling for the last couple issues with this series, being that Cody he's been really great given the chance to tell the story he wants to tell. The problem is he gets caught up in all of these events. He gets caught up in all these storylines that are just outside of the Miles Morales book. And it's not fair, but it's also not fair to us as readers. I'm at the point now where I just don't think I'm enjoying this book anymore. Like, and I hate that that's the case, but it truly is. And I think that this might be the last issue that I'm reviewing here, at least for the immediate future. Hey, if I'm totally misreading this, though, do me a favor, leave me a comment down below and let me know maybe what I'm missing. But as for right now, I just quite frankly can't recommend this book. All right, let's talk Public Domain's Return with issue number 6, written and drawn by Chip Zdarsky. I was so worried that with the time frame that it's taken between issue 5 and issue 6 for its return, that I would kind of lose interest in this story or that I would lose a little bit of its luster. And I am happy to say it absolutely has not happened. Reading this issue brought me right back into this world. It made me love these characters once again, and it kind of picked up right where we left off in a fun and exciting way. So now that the main family here has regained rights to start publishing with the characters that they now have sole creative rights over, we're starting to see some of the meta aspects of comics and comic creating coming into play. This is kind of a version of the classic Stan and Jack story, as you know, Stan Lee got sole creative rights over some of these characters, and Jack, who definitely had a hand in creating them, some say that he absolutely should have sole rights over the creation of these characters. We see the inversion of that as, you know, the artist does get the creative rights back. So we see a really cool back and forth with these old school creators and what they want to do with these creations. But the more fascinating exploration is now that they have the rights and they can both individually work with under these umbrellas of this universe. We also see from a different aspect, you know, the new guard, some of the new writers and artists of the right here and right now wanting to explore different avenues that maybe aren't the same as maybe what's writers and artists were looking for in the 60s, 70s, and maybe even the 80s. So I thought it was a really fun, cool exploration because it never gets too heavy handed with what they're trying to say, even though we know the discourse around comics can absolutely get heavy handed, just like that. This takes a fun approach to it, even though it still is a serious talking point. The one thing that I really loved about this issue, though, is that it explores the relationship of some of the people that go unsung, which are the editors of these comics. More often than not, they become the scapegoats. Even I do it. But when they are doing their best work and when they're really supporting the writers and the artists and supporting the storyline of a comic, that's when things truly soar. But under those circumstances, they rarely get the credit that they deserve. So it's really cool to see both of these old school characters kind of like go to bat and try to get this editor back because they know that she is absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, not only the best at what she does, but the best at keeping their egos in line. So again, really cool exploration. I was so excited to have this issue back, and it was one of my favorite comics this week. Speaking of returning comics, let's talk our runner up pick of the week, which is going to be Spider-Man Reign 2, number 1, written and drawn by Kari Andrews. This is one of those series that I never would have expected got a sequel. Being that the first series of Spider-Man Reign was kind of the Marvel and Spider-Man version of The Dark Knight Returns. We know how the Dark Knight Returns sequel went, and the sequel after that went. So to see Marvel do the same thing, honestly, was a little bit worrying, especially because some of the discourse behind the first series and some of the more controversial events, which quite honestly, I don't understand why people scoff at it in a world where people sling webs and people turn into gamma monsters. Come on, get over the stuff from that first series. But speaking of this series in particular, I think that this picks up in a very interesting way, whereas we still see Peter as the old man, but we're seeing him in a place that I didn't expect because he kind of regained that Peter Parker attitude at the end of the first series. But this kind of draws us back into that morose Parker Luck version of the old man Peter. But things pick up very quickly from there on after. We're introduced to some new characters here that I definitely are going to play into some of the classic Spider-Man characters that we know and love. One of them particularly being a feline version of one of them. And we see Peter kind of getting drugged back into a new battle as Kingpin has now taken control over New York. And some of the things that were put into play within that first series are having impacts on New York and the world right here and right now in a really fascinating way. The most interesting part about this, though, is that Carrie Andrews in the first series definitely really invoked heavily that Frank Miller line work, that Frank Miller storytelling aspect. And within this series, it is a sequel, but it's almost as if he's telling a story, whereas the first series was about the 80s, right? And particularly 1986 when The Dark Knight Returns came out. This is almost speaking to the 90s, where everything feels a little bit more 90s. I don't know how else to put it. It's extreme, it's in your face, it's action packed. And you can tell some of that not only by the way that Kari Andrews is kind of evoking a Todd McFarlane feel to the way that he's drawing Spider-Man in the universe, but also just some of the paneling in here as well, and the way that they're working in some sound effects and some of the action beats within this story. Really cool, really inventive things that keep the panel flowing and keeping the action at the absolute top notch that it could be. So I was really enthused to see this back. I think that it actually did everything it should have done for an introductory issue from the second series. And quite honestly, I'm like super excited to see where this can go because I think it can actually surpass the first series. All right, and this should come as no surprise as the sky is blue, the grass is green, and our top comic of the week is Conan the Barbarian number 12, written by Jim Zub with artwork by Roberto Della Torre. This was the absolute best issue of Conan to date, and that is not to be taken lightly because this has been one of my favorite series since it's come out with its the Titan imprint here. And man, every single issue has been exciting. Every single issue has been done with love and care, and the story that they're crafting here, this feels like the culmination. This feels like everything we've been building to. And the beautiful thing about Conan as a series is that every issue has been somewhat episodic. However, they've given you enough. They've given you the building blocks as you see the story evolve and grow and change. And this is the ending of Conan's time traveling adventures here, where he's back in time with Kull, and we're seeing kind of the origins almost of Thulsa Doom and how he wants to kind of re-manifest and take over the world. The story is great. Don't get me wrong. I think Jim Zub is doing a fantastic job. He's only outpaced by the artwork of Roberto Della Torre, though, because the compositions that he has in this book are breathtaking. There are full page spreads where he is just letting everything wash over you as Thulsa is telling his story and doing the bad guy thing where he kind of lays out his plan, he lays out his past, his future, everything that's going to happen. And it's just so exciting. It's so breathtaking to behold here. And the exciting thing is that while seems to be like the end of maybe the first and second arc of Conan, it also serves as a fantastic jumping on point because this is going to be the story that takes us moving forward as Conan and Thulsa are definitely going to come to blows because this almost feels like the origin story of of their them being nemesis, them kind of butting heads and becoming the enemies, I guess. So this was absolutely fantastic. It's something that really is the best visual storytelling absolutely of this week. This might be my favorite single issue honestly so far this year itself. Great marriage of storytelling, perfect pitch, and I just can't wait to see where this continues to go. So Conan the Barbarian number 12, your top comic of the week. All right, so that's what I got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What did you read and what were your thoughts? Do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe, and leave me a comment down below to be part of the panel. Thanks again for watching. We'll talk to you next week.